coloring and activating watercolor pencils properly is not enough when you want your art to look 3D and realistic. There's something else few people talk about that you need to do when you use them. I'm going to explain what this is and you're going to get why it's so important when I show you how I execute that technique in my paintings. Hi, I'm Françoise. Welcome or welcome back to my channel. I'll be using this sketchbook by Stillman & Byrne. It's great with watercolor pencils. And I also be using the Derwent Graphitint pencils. There are graphite particles in them and they act exactly like any watercolor pencil you might be used to instead. And by the way, the technique that I'm going to showcase today, as well as all the other techniques that I show in my watercolor pencil videos, apply to all water-soluble pencils, and that's why I do not find it relevant to make a distinction, because you can use this with regular watercolor pencils like the Faber-Castell Arbor Durer, but also the ink-based pencils, Derwent Inktense, these Derwent Graphitint pencils here, and pretty much anything water-soluble that you can color with and activate with a paintbrush. I had made swatches for my pencil set. You can see the colors are slightly muted, which I love for the project I want to tackle today, this sea lion. And that's actually part of a Vancouver Island sketchbook project. We'll be using only two colors, sage and juniper, and I want to add these water-soluble graphite pencils by Faber-Castell. And as always with any water-soluble pencils, simple supplies are enough, and that's why I'll stick to the sketchbook, one water jar, paper towels, and these two paintbrushes. The technique I want to highlight today has to do with rendering the shape of your subject, and coloring is the starting point. And I do that with a lead that's a bit blunt because there is no need for great precision since I'll activate the pigment later. I still avoid pressing really hard and I use wide circular motions to avoid indenting the paper mainly. To deposit more pigment, I just overlap on top, and that's going to help create parts in the painting that will appear darker because there's more pigment there. And that will contribute to shaping the subject with a certain level of contrast between light and dark areas. So yes, coloring properly is important to render shape in a realistic way, but it's not enough. And that's why you can see I'm following the curve of the sea lion's belly with a pencil here. And I also do it there when shading this part of it. It's really important to imagine the shape, to visualize it, and to color it as if it was a real 3D thing. And surprisingly enough, I don't even think that this is labeled as a technique, but I think that the awareness alone can help you make your drawings and your paintings less flat. And I think that the main reason for that is that it's going to train you to imagine the object or thing, and that's going to help your observation skills in the process. And that's how I think that for me it became really easy to create realistic art after a few months of practice. I became really good at observing because I always imagine my subject. For example here, now I'm done with the sage color, which is like a yellow ochre color. I'm overlapping more on top with juniper. And juniper is supposed to be a deep green, but it's actually more like a mauve color here, but that's okay. I'm overlapping in those areas that look darker on the reference, since a reference photo is your primary guide to knowing where to add a color and how light or dark it should be. But I also understand, thanks to the fact I try and visualize the shape as I color, that it makes sense this area of the belly underneath the flipper needs to be darker for the flipper to actually detach itself from it and look like it is separate and in front of it. Let me know in the comments if that makes sense, and I'd really like some feedback from you because I don't get that many comments and that's not always easy to know what you guys like and what I should make more of, so please let me know. Rendering shape through imagination doesn't stop with the coloring. Here I'm ready to activate the pencil, and I'm careful to preserve the white areas by wetting them first before moving towards the colored areas, because the activated pigments will be able to melt into the white of the paper, and the gradient between color and white will look seamless. That's also important. Notice I activate everything while still following the shape of the animal. It's as if I was painting on a 3D object. And it's most visible here on the belly because it's round and it catches the light towards the left. So it really helps to place curvy brush strokes there. While in the flippers, I find it less important because they're more flat to begin with. And just shading properly will produce 90% of the expected results on these. That's how with a quick base, this sea lion looks already pretty good. I like to push it a little further and fix the drying lines I got at the bottom of the belly. So let's do another layer and I'll show you how to place the details while visualizing shape once more. There are a lot of light tones here with the white of the paper and also mid-tones, the sage and juniper colors, but we're lacking darker tones to increase the realism. And I thought it would be nice to use my Faber-Castell water-soluble graphite pencils again. I think they're more effective with shadows than gray watercolor pencils because the leads are softer and the 8B pencil in particular gives great results with deep shadows. That's why I targeted the key features in the face first and now the darkest parts in the flippers and body. And notice that I start adding noticeable strokes now to create creases in the flesh. For the flippers, it's the 10% we were missing. Remember I talked about 90% with the shading, and that will be the other 10%. Again, this comes from observation and it's easier for me to be aware because for the whole time, I'm not just treating the photo as a flat object, as just a photo. I'm really imagining the sea lion at the same time. And I really hope this helps because it's key to improve fast, especially if you like to draw and paint from reference. I'm doing it again in the neck this time, following the imaginary curve of the flesh there and imagining the creases and bumps in it. I'll press harder, usually add more pigment or a darker color when I see a crease or a hollow area. And then I'll press lighter or use light colors whenever I see a rounded part. Sometimes it can also be helpful to leave these rounded parts alone, like the belly here, to avoid adding too much color, because what we want is to create a nice contrast between the light and the dark tones. Midtones are always important to bridge the gap between the two. You really need all three, and you can't get it through pencil pressure, through overlapping more pigment, or through using darker colors. And for the lighter tones, you can also leave paper white areas or add artificial highlights. For maximum realism, I really like to use all these techniques combined. And if you need more examples of that, you'll see it in all my watercolor pencil videos here. I have so many of them by now. But also my watercolor pencil tutorials on my Patreon. I share them in real time and with my voiceover so you can follow along. And this one is actually part of it, so I'll add a link to that in the description of the video in case you'd like to join. Again, the blending is important here, so when I activate these colors once more, I still imagine the sea lion and I follow the shape of each body part. Adding a few details brings the realism to a whole new level as long as it's not too many details. That's why here I'm adding features for the whiskers like these dots. The whiskers are an important aspect of this animal. And you'll notice when you look at the reference that some of them are straight, but a few are also curvy. So it's varying the shape here, but also varying the length of the whiskers. That's going to make the whole thing look natural in a drawing or a painting. So observation is always going to be key, but your imagination is what's going to help you notice these little things. To add a glistening effect onto the skin, I also dip the lead of the white graphite pencil in water to soften it and activate the pigment directly on it, and then I deposit a few specks of color on the paper. Let me know below how you enjoyed this video. I cannot wait to paint more of these Vancouver Island memories, even if the reference came from a free stock photo website, because I just like to mix and match and go with whatever inspires me as long as it's on theme. Remember, you can join me on Patreon to paint along with me or just check out videos like this one here to help you learn about watercolor pencils a little more. Thank you for watching and see you next time.